Greetings, friends. I am not going to talk like that for the whole episode. I can't do it. Some people have said I should, but I just can't do it. Welcome back to another episode of Augury, Bibliomancy, and Chaos. In today's episode, episode 2, I'm going to be getting further down into Carl Jung. I've got this website here, Simply Psychology, but I do want to take a moment to note you probably can hear the improved audio quality. I am technologically impaired, and I just found out today that there are settings in Streamlabs for adding audio compression and getting rid of that annoying hiss in the background. I apologize for the quality of earlier videos, but looks like I'm getting this process dialed in. Hey, what do you want for free, right? So today we have Simply Psychology website, and once again, all these links I'm going to show you are going to be in the description, and I encourage everyone to please follow them and read along if you wish, or at least after the video is done, go back and read more. So today, talking about Carl Jung. Carl Jung and Freud were contemporaries, and what does that mean? These guys were old. As I said, Freud was one of the OGs. So here we've got a picture from 1909, courtesy of the Library of Congress. A bunch of the early pioneers in the work of psychology itself from 100 years ago. And think about that too. Here we are in 2020. This was back in 1910, and psychology was pretty much brand new at the time. I mean, taking a medical approach, a scientific approach to understanding the mind and human behavior, that just happened, about 100 years ago. And this is after 2,000 or 6,000 years of recorded human history and all our different attempts. In some other episodes, I'll try to get around to talking about specifically the history of dreams, how they've been interpreted across cultures and civilizations and throughout time. But today I want to focus mostly on one of my main dream interpretation influences, which is Carl Jung. He was an early supporter of Freud's work because they both shared an interest in the unconscious. He was an active member of the Vienna Psychoanalytic Society, once upon a time known as the Wednesday Psychological Society. So here again is another picture from 1910. Look at these guys. There they are. However, in about 1912, while on a lecture tour of America, Jung publicly criticized Freud's theory of the Oedipus complex and his emphasis on infantile sexuality. The following year, this led to an irrevocable split between them, and Jung went on to develop his own version of psychoanalytic theory. I'm going to get down there in a minute, but I've got another tab here for you guys. That's not it. Here we go. Getting into a little bit about what Freud was doing, and I'll do another video on Freud at some point, but Freud was working with nothing. He was literally just pulling this stuff out of his ass, trying to make sense of what am I seeing here. So what was happening with Freud is that he had relevant pieces of the puzzle, but he didn't have them all put together for the complete picture. So when people look at some of these things and they dismiss it or criticize it, you would look at it as in context of the whole puzzle. That piece that Freud discovered is a real piece, but it is not the complete picture. It is not the sum total of what they were looking at here. So just about the Oedipal complex in brief, it was a term used by Freud in his theory of the psychosexual stages of development. It's a generic term for both Oedipus and Electra complexes. They were gendered: Oedipus for boys, Electra for girls. Freud said that the Oedipal complex occurred during the phallic stage of development between ages 3 and 6, which is the source of libido, life force, and is concentrated in the erogenous zone of a child's body. This is Freud from 1905. So there's something to that, but as I said, it's not the complete picture, and maybe his conceptualization of it was not thorough enough, but it laid the foundation. This is like somebody flattened the ground, and then other people were able to come along and put a highway on it, So really really foundational in that sense. Again, go read more about that. They're fascinating theories, and they are, again, valid pieces of the puzzle, things to consider when putting this stuff together. So Jung, his assumptions in his analytical psychology reflected his theoretical differences with Freud. For example, Jung agreed with Freud that a person's past childhood experiences do determine, or in my opinion at least strongly influence, future behavior. That's the part Freud got right, but I agree with Jung that Freud's narrowing of that down to just a specific age and just a specific psychosexual framework was too limited and didn't grasp the big picture. But Jung also believed that we are shaped by our future aspirations as well. So here's a good kind of basic description of the differences between Jung and Freud. So when we talk about assumptions, these are theories put forth. Okay, if this is true, if this is how it works, then this is what it looks like. So assumptions about the nature and purpose of the libido, the sex drive. Jung, let's go with Freud first. Freud said it was a source of psychic energy specific to sexual gratification. Jung, and I agree, says it's more of a generalized source of psychic energy, motivating a range of behaviors. So in this sense, human beings have multiple complex motivations. And yes, our sex drive is one. We want to reproduce like bunnies. Some people don't, but as a species, our sex drive is a drive. It drives us. It drives a lot of our behaviors. But we also have a drive to eat food, to keep ourselves alive. We have multiple different kinds of ways of interacting with the world. If I was to reference, say, Jordan Peterson, he would say we have an innate sense of a desire for meaning, a kind of purposeful desire, the desire to do something of importance, to leave an impact. So that is another valid drive. So there's sexual, and there's hunger, and there's a drive for meaning, and there's a lot of different drives. So that's when I say Freud had one piece of the puzzle, it was a valid piece, and there are other pieces, and you put them all together and you get a better complete picture. So on the nature of consciousness, Freud would say it is a storehouse for, the nature of the unconscious. Freud's theory was it is a storehouse for unacceptable or repressed desires specific to the individual. Jung said it is a storehouse of repressed memories specific to the individual and our ancestral past. So here's where I'm going to disagree with both of them. Again, they have a piece of the puzzle. Yes, in your unconscious is repressed memories, repressed desires, unacceptable pieces of yourself, sure, but also a lot of other things. So we'll get more to that later. In terms of the cause for human behavior, what drives it, where does it come from? Freud said it is a result, kind of a cause and effect of past experiences, particularly in early childhood. Jung said it is past experiences in addition to future aspirations. Again, they're both right, but just a piece of the puzzle. There's more to it than that, which is why my dream interpretation style is very eclectic. I bring them in, they got something to say, but there's more to it than that. Coming down here again, going back to the theory of the libido, Jung in 1948 disagreed with Freud regarding the role of sexuality. He believed the libido was not just sexual energy, but instead generalized psychic energy. For Jung, the purpose of psychic energy was to motivate the individual in a number of important ways, including spirituality, intellect, creativity. It was also an individual's motivational source for seeking pleasure and reducing conflict. Theory of the unconscious, like Freud and Erikson, Jung regarded the psyche as made up of a number of separate but interacting systems. The three main ones were the ego, the personal unconscious, and the collective unconscious. So I want to deviate just a moment. I'm going to throw some up on the screen regarding this theory of the unconscious, but I want to share something else with you guys. Some people, maybe many people, have never heard of what's called the Johari window. It's a grid, 2 by 2, a total of 4 squares, and it talks about awareness. It talks about consciousness itself. So you can say you're sitting here listening to this podcast or YouTube channel, and you are aware of yourself and your thoughts and your environment and your sensations. But there are then perhaps many things you don't know, or things you do know and don't know that you do know. This is why I threw this up on the screen, so let's go through it. You've got the open self, that's information about yourself that you and others know. So this is what you and other people around you can see or understand about yourself. Then we've got the blind self. This is information that you don't know, but others know about you. This is the area where, say, feedback comes from. This is stuff you haven't put together yourself. It's things you're not aware of, but other people can see it. Your hair's mussed up and you're not standing in front of a mirror. Someone can let you know that because they can see you in a way that you can't see yourself at that moment, and that applies to things we don't know about, perhaps our behavior or our own motivations. We can get that feedback from other people. Then there is the hidden self, information that you know about yourself, but that others don't know. And there's a tremendous amount of information in there. Number one, we can't share everything we know with everyone we meet all day, every day, nonstop. So of the vast majority of everything in your head and in your person is your hidden self. And that gets to Jung's, some of Jung's theory, and we'll get back around to that. Then there is the unknown self. And this is information about yourself that you don't know and other people can't see. This would be all the things that are unexpressed about you and nobody else can see it or know it, and you don't even know it yourself. So getting back to the article. So according to Jung, the ego represents the conscious mind as it comprises the thoughts, memories, and emotions that a person is aware of. The ego is largely responsible for feelings of identity and continuity. And I believe, I could be mistaken, but I believe Jung at this point was borrowing Freud's concept of the ego and playing with it. Literally, these guys were the OGs. They were paving the road. They were literally inventing these terms, trying to describe in a more clinical, scientific manner what they were seeing in human behavior and how that expressed itself, how to understand it, how to quantify it, measure it, and describe it most accurately. Like Freud, Jung, from his works in 21 and 33, emphasized the importance of the unconscious in relation to personality. However, he proposed that the unconscious consisted of two layers. The first layer he called the personal unconscious is essentially the same as Freud's version. The personal unconscious, according to Jung, contains temporarily forgotten information as well as repressed memories. So as you sit here, you can think your thoughts, but there's all kind of thoughts that you know. There's things you know, but you're just not currently thinking it. You've forgotten about it. It's not on your mind currently. Jung in 33 outlined an important feature of the personal unconscious called complexes. A complex is a collection of thoughts, feelings, attitudes, and memories that focus in a single concept. The more elements attached to the complex, the greater its influence on the individual. Jung also believed that the personal unconscious was much nearer the surface than Freud had suggested, and Jungian therapy is less concerned with repressed childhood experiences. It is the present and the future, which this view was the key to both the analysis of neurosis and its treatment. I'm having trouble putting words together and reading a plain sentence. So this is a video here, a link in the description. Watch it, it's fantastic. Carl Jung was already an old man in the 1940s when this was, or 30s? I don't know when this interview was done, sorry. But again, we're talking about people born in the mid to late 1800s, and they're coming into the prime of their theoretical contributions in 1910, 20, 30. that just blows my mind that this stuff, not only did it happen 100 years ago, that's not that long ago. That's the sum total of our knowledge of psychology kind of came from and started with a lot of these theories. Moving on. However, by far the most important difference between Jung and Freud is Jung's notion of the collective or transpersonal unconscious. And actually, before I get to that, I wanted to pop up. No, I'm not going to do that yet. Hang on. So the transpersonal unconscious. This is his most original and controversial contribution to personality theory. So I am going to pop this up here. This is where I was going. So we've got this description here from Psychologist World about the collective unconscious. It was the key to Jung's theories of mind, as the collective unconscious is what contains archetypes. Rather, Jung would say, than being born as a tabula rasa, a complete blank slate, and being influenced purely by our environment, as the English philosopher John Locke believed, Jung proposed that we are each born with a collective unconscious. This contains a set of shared memories and ideas which we can all identify with, regardless of the culture that we were born into or the time period in which we live. We cannot communicate through the collective unconscious, but we recognized some of the same ideas innately, including archetypes. For example, many cultures have similar myths independent of one another, which feature similar characters and themes, such as the creation of the universe. So creation myths, or religions with their own creation story, that's something shared across cultures. The idea of, in my case, the wizard, the wise old man who has secret knowledge, can see the future and speak magic words, that crosses cultures. Joseph Campbell's work, I wish I brought that page up, on The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And again, Campbell was kind of a, these guys, it's fascinating, these guys are all related. So we've got Freud and Jung, and then we've got Joseph Campbell, and Campbell knew Jung. And then Tolkien knew Campbell, and I think he might have known Jung. And then from Freud and Carl Jung to Joseph Campbell and Tolkien, and then the work of Campbell, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, was influenced George Lucas, and that's how we got Star Wars. So really, you can thank Carl Jung for Star Wars, if you're a fan. Going over here real quick, this is a great image I found that kind of gets more into Jung's archetypal and theories regarding the collective unconscious, and how he kind of looked at those things. I'm not going to read off the whole thing, but again, this link will be in the description as well, and you can visit it. And whether or not this is absolutely necessarily true, it's a great way to look at the concepts involved, and to just be aware of in terms of having a piece of the puzzle that hopefully will help each person develop a more full picture of themselves and their place in the world. Going back to the article. So this level of unconscious shared with other members of the human species comprised latent memories from our ancestral and evolutionary past. The form of the world into which a person is born is already inborn in him as a virtual image, Jung would say, and did say in 1953. According to Jung, the human mind has innate characteristics imprinted on it as a result of evolution. And there are theories that our DNA, I may have said this before, our very DNA has an imprint from what our ancestors have experienced. And in just a purely biological sense, that is true. How does that relate to the formation of the structure of our mind, and how we are able to observe, process, and interact with elements of the world? We're still learning that, but that's, again, foundational stuff. These are true, these are valid theories. What do we do with it is the next step. These universal predispositions stem from our ancestral past. Fear of the dark, snakes, spiders might be examples, and is And it is interesting that this idea has recently been revived in the theory of prepared conditioning. I'm going to have to look more into that. I'm not sure who Seligman is from 71. The name seems familiar, but it's not coming to mind. However, more important than isolated tendencies are those aspects of the collective unconscious that have developed into separate subsystems of personality. Jung in 47 called these ancestral memories and images archetypes. So we got Jungian archetypes. What was this? Oh, no, we're going to get to that next. So Jungian archetypes are images and themes that have universal meanings. This means every person would, regardless of where they're born, just the fact that you're born human, you would have the ability to understand or observe the world through these frameworks. Universal meanings across cultures that show up in dreams, literature, art, or religion. Jung believes symbols from different cultures are often very similar because they have emerged from archetypes shared by the whole human race, which are part of what he called the collective unconscious. For Jung, our primitive past becomes the basis of the human psyche, directing and influencing present behavior. Jung claimed to identify a large number of archetypes, but paid special attention to 4. Jung labeled these the self, the persona, the shadow, and the anima or animus. So the persona is the outward face we present to the world. It conceals our real self, and Jung described this as the conformity archetype. This is the public face or role that a person presents to others as someone different to who we really are, as if an actor putting on a mask. So you'll see this in a lot of places. You know, you've got to behave in a manner appropriate to the circumstances. Let's say you got to put on your game face. You want to present that, all right, I'm here to do business, I'm here to win. You put on your work face. You try and conform yourself to the expectations where you're at, the setting, and that depends. I mean, if your job is a steel worker, it's one thing. If your job is a musician, it's the face, the persona you put on is different. And the persona can be true. It can be real. It doesn't have to be fake. You're not faking anything. It's more of a self-limitation within a conforming structure for the setting. And then he had the anima and the animus. This is what he referred to as the mirror image of our biological sex. That is the unconscious feminine side in males and the masculine tendencies in women. Each sex manifests attitudes and behaviors of the other by virtue of centuries of living together. The psyche of woman contains masculine aspects. The animus would be the masculine side of women, and the psyche of a man contains feminine aspects, the anima archetype. And this is, I'm not going to get too much into this because this could be its own video, and maybe it will be someday, but the idea that throughout my life, I'm always brought back to the Taoist symbol of the yin-yang. And yin and yang are masculine and feminine in that context as well. But the circle with the 2 teardrops, and they're in perfect symmetry and harmony. They're represented by opposing colors, one bright, one dark. And then a lot of representations also have a little spot of light in the dark and a little spot of dark in the light, and those would be those complementary yet opposite elements that are contained within the opposites. Now, I'm not expressing this very well, and I didn't bring up a picture. I should have brought up a picture. Anyway, I'll get back to that perhaps another day. Also is the shadow. This is the animal side of our personality, what Freud would have described as the id. Freud had the id, the ego, and the superego. So this is Freud's id. According to Jung, the shadow is the source of both our creative and destructive energies. In line with evolutionary theory, it may be that Jung's archetypes reflect predispositions that once had survival value. And honestly, today we are the products of those who survived in history. So that would mean just the general theory of evolution being that natural selection, is a bit of a misnomer. Nothing's getting selected. There's no conscious choice to pick one over the other. Just one thing worked better than the other. One thing was more functional, and functional was determined by, did it help you survive long enough to reproduce and pass on your genes? And so there's very likely structures, and I think it's been shown, I don't have, again, more web pages pulled up, but it's been shown that the functional structures of our brain evolved that way because they work, because they serve a useful purpose. Moving on, Jung also theorized the self, which he said provides a sense of unity in experience. For Jung, the ultimate aim of every individual is to achieve a state of selfhood, similar to another, I don't remember who came up with the term self-actualization. Probably should have pulled up that page too. Next time, we'll get into that more. And in this respect, Jung, like Erikson, is moving in a direction of a more humanist orientation. And broadly speaking, the humanist psychologist is where I draw a lot of my eclectic approach to psychology in general, and specifically to dream work. The idea of, what was his name? It was a guy, unconditional positive regard. I want to say Carl Rogers, something like that. But that's, there's two things you need to really connect with someone and to be therapeutic. Number one is unconditional positive regard. You communicate and actually focus your energies on achieving outcomes that are beneficial to the person, because that's what you genuinely want. And genuineness is another side, but that unconditional positive regard is hey, you're a person, I love you as a human being in the Jesus kind of way, and I want you to be happy and healthy and whole and survive, and that unconditional positive regard. There's no conditions on it. I just want what's best for you. That's a key humanistic psychology perspective. But also genuineness, just be real. If you know something, say, hey, I know this, let me tell you. If you don't know something, say, hey, I don't know it. If your natural reaction is to hearing something is to cringe and say, ooh, that sounds bad, just be real, just be you. You can communicate anything in a genuine way with unconditional positive regard, and sometimes it doesn't work out, but coming from that perspective is the best framework to make a connection and to have a beneficial therapeutic impact on someone. Enough of my ranting, back to the article. There was certainly Jung's belief, or that was certainly Jung's belief, and in his book, The Undiscovered Self, he argued that many of the problems in modern life are caused by man's progressive alienation from his instinctual foundation. One aspect of his views on the significance of the anima and the animus. Jung argues that these archetypes are products of the collective experience of men and women living together. However, in modern civilization, men are discouraged from living their feminine side and women from expressing masculine tendencies. For Jung, the result was that the full psychological development of both sexes was undermined. Together with the prevailing patriarchal culture of Western civilizations, this has led to the devaluation of feminine qualities altogether, and the predominance of the persona, the mask, has elevated insincerity to a way of life which goes unquestioned by millions every day. And now I just read that out. I'm not going to focus too much on my thoughts on, but again, these are pieces of the puzzle, early foundations, now you're getting kind of a history of where these ideas came from, why they have relevance today, and where they made their way into our modern life. And I think now's the time for this one here. Before I get to criticism, so what did these things look like? What did Carl Jung specifically contribute to psychology? Of course, Jungian theory has numerous critics. It's theoretical and it's open to criticism. Jung's work has definitely left a notable impact on psychology, most notably his concepts of introversion and extroversion. Should have followed that link, but again, this link here will be in the notes below. But imagine that, before Jung introduced this concept, nobody was talking about introverts and extroverts, and now it's everywhere. It's pop psychology in a way. It's entered our daily lexicon of just phrases everybody knows. those concepts contributed to personality psychology and also influenced psychotherapy. His advice to a patient suffering from alcoholism led to the formation of Alcoholics Anonymous, which has helped millions of people suffering from alcohol dependence. And you can see, just briefly here, I'm not going to link all of these, but these are works by Carl Jung if you want to actually go and read them. Back to the article. So, critical evaluation. Jung's ideas have not been as popular as Freud's. Now, I don't remember when this article was written, but it's to say they're not as popular. I think that's just an opinion of this author, and maybe it's an informed opinion because a lot of the theories have not been taken up as a system. Like Freud had a system, his psychoanalysis, and there's even psychoanalytical dream analysis done specifically through a Freudian perspective, and these are surviving systems today. In my opinion, Jung's contributions were more ideas, like foundational, groundbreaking ideas, and they are very much also like Freud. They're so foundational that they're in everything today. They've influenced just about everything we do in psychology. So to say they're not as popular, maybe they're not as well known, but I would hope to change that. Maybe my producing videos will give more people a chance to appreciate what Carl Jung brought to the table in psychology. Again, this might be because Jung did not write for the layman, and as such his ideas were not greatly disseminated, as were Freud's. It may be because Jung's ideas were a little more mystical and obscure and less clearly explained. And if you try and read Jung's work, you're going to get a lot of metaphysical, descriptive stuff, because he's dealing with things that are intangible. And again, trying to take these pieces of the puzzle that he sees, real pieces, and put them together into something coherent. And he didn't always nail it on the head, and he didn't always draw the complete picture. We are definitely still learning. On the whole, modern psychology has not viewed Jung's theory of archetypes kindly. Ernest Jones, Freud's biographer, tells us that Jung descended into pseudo-philosophy out of which he never emerged, and that many of his ideas look more like New Age mystical speculation than a scientific contribution to psychology. However, while Jung's research into ancient myths and legends, his interest in astrology and fascination with Eastern religions can be seen in that light, it is also worth remembering that the images he is writing about have, as a matter of historical fact, exerted an enduring hold on the human mind. Furthermore, Jung himself argues that the constant recurrence of symbols from mythology in personal therapy and in the fantasies of psychotics supported the idea of an innate, collective, cultural residue. In line with evolutionary theory, it may be that Jung's archetypes reflect predispositions that once had survival value. Jung proposed that human responses to archetypes are similar to instinctual responses in animals. One criticism of Jung is that there is no evidence that the archetypes are biologically based or similar to animal instincts. Fair enough. We haven't been able to poke an area of the brain and generate images necessary. Although we have been able to, direct certain magnetic resonance to areas of the brain, and it either increases or decreases people's feelings of religiosity, feelings of spiritual importance. So there's definitely something biological going on there. But again, I didn't pull that article up. I probably should have thought of that. Rather than being seen as purely biological, more recent research suggests that archetypes emerge directly from our experience and are reflections of linguistic or cultural characteristics. Now, that was a criticism here from this person, but again, in my opinion, that doesn't quite capture the idea that these archetypes transcend cultures and time. These are things we've known and can instantly recognize no matter where you were born, what culture you were in. It varies to some degree, the specific imagery, the context, but the core is so universal that maybe it's just universal to human experience, and therefore, because we have these experiences, every single one of us, we get these archetypes built in our mind as a result of experience. I don't know that she's really saying I don't know why I think this person is a she, but I don't know if this person here is just saying the same thing Jung said in a different way, or taking a different approach to it, but I don't know that it's necessarily a contradiction. However, Jung's work has also contributed to mainstream psychology in at least one significant aspect. He was the first to distinguish the two major attitudes or orientations of personality, introversion and extroversion. He also identified four basic functions: thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuiting. And you'll see these in the Big Five. Is it the Big Five? No, it's the 16 personality archetypes. I didn't bring that up either. I'll do another article about that perhaps someday. But psychologists like Hans Eisnick and Raymond Cattell have subsequently built upon this, as well as being a cultural icon for generations of psychology undergraduates. Jung therefore put forward ideas which were important to the development of modern personality theory. And at the bottom of this article, you'll find a ton of references. I didn't read them all, but pick one and dive into it. It's fascinating stuff. There's more article links. And just scroll back to the top here so you can see the page one more time before you leave. And then I'm going to bring up this other one here. So how did this tradition of thought translate into what is called Jungian therapy today? So I pulled up this page here at betterhelp.com, and we've got a description of Jungian psychology. It's practiced through a form of analytical talk therapy. The goal is healing, wholeness, which happens when the conscious and unconscious minds are integrated and balanced. To do this, the therapist helps you look past the face, the persona that you present to the world, and find the deeper elements of your psyche. And in a lot of ways, this is what people call cognitive behavioral therapy today. And again, it started with Freud and Jung. You sit down and you talk to the person. You find out, what are you experiencing? What's going on in your life? How do you feel about it? And try and, getting back into this Johari window here, trying to find ways that the therapist can see information that you don't know and then help bring that into your open self so that you can be consciously aware of it and then choose what to do with it. You can see it's got conditions treated there. How does this all relate to my dream work? Well, I think I know I'm very strongly influenced by Jung. I have a tremendous fascination with archetypes and symbols and interpretation and cross-cultural mythology. I mean, my first love was philosophy, and it was just too big. Couldn't grab it all, so I grabbed something narrower, the philosophy of human behavior, which became psychology. Trying to measure it, quantify it, improve it, help people in that more narrow and scientific framework. So when I do my dream work with folks, and you've heard me do it, we get into their experience. We get into, let's get some more details, and then let's talk about what is this related to? How does that person see it, feel it? A lot of my work is asking for feedback. Is this what you meant? Is this what you think? What do you make of that? Because it doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what it looks like to me if it doesn't resonate with a person. And again, that's that kind of innate, almost visceral sense of meaning. Something has to hit you as meaningful, and you go, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's when you know you got something. So if you're more interested in Jungian therapy, you can visit this site here. Again, link will be in the description. And it even gets down into a little bit of dream interpretation. Not going to read that right now. Looks like we're rolling on almost 40 minutes. I did not plan to talk this long, but at this time, I want to thank you all for joining me for another episode 2 of Augury, Bibliomancy, and Chaos. Thanks for listening.